Saurabh, and you're listening to my favorite talk show, The Weekly Show with Aditya. The Weekly Show with Aditya.
This is episode 474 on the 26th of January 2022 as we hurl towards another milestone episode. Just one episode remains. Just one episode remains as we will complete another milestone episode, the first milestone episode of the year 2022. And can you tell me how many talk shows have even completed 475 episodes, let alone 75 episodes? None. No talk show on this planet will be able to compete. They're all rookies, they're all in the early stages. It's a long way to go for them, and that's the most important thing. That's the fun part. How many talk shows can compete? 475 episodes, another milestone coming your way very soon. And no talk show can compete. But talking about competition, actual competition, the India South Africa series did not go according to plan for one team. Of course, one team went on to win the tournament 3-0, while the other team, rude missed chances, what they could have done better. But the interesting thing was that all these negative comments did not come from the team management or the players themselves, but it came from a group which has no standing. And that's the most interesting part. Yes, losing and winning is part of the sport, but it's not the end of the world. There's a long way to go. It's not a doomsday scenario as if the team loses now, they have no chance of going further or having a chance in the upcoming tournament. So let's see how the game number 2 and game number 3 went. In game number 2, India scored a decent 6 for 287 after a good opening partnership, couple of good partnerships, and they made their way to 287 with good contributions from number 7 to number 8. Of course, that's been a subject of discussion. Who should bat at number 7? Who is the all-rounder? Of course, once again, it comes to bowling all-rounder, batting all-rounder. I don't even know what that means. If somebody can bat and bowl and they can contribute and they have a decent statistics as far as batting and bowling is concerned, I don't care whether they are batting all-rounders or bowling all-rounders. Why have we developed such terms? Because the current lot of pseudo experts are jealous. They never got a chance to prove themselves. Few did, but a majority of them were, well, their contracts were not renewed. They were dumped from the team by the selection committee and the cricket board. So they are jealous. Why did we not get an opportunity? Why, when we wanted to bowl and bat, we were not called all-rounders? Because this term, of course, we are obsessed with terms like white ball and red ball and pink ball and batting all-rounder and bowling all-rounder and keeper batter and batter, keeper, it doesn't matter. If you can keep decently and you can contribute, it doesn't matter whether you are a keeper first or a batter second or a batter first or a keeper second or a bowler first or a batter second. If that's the case, then I would have in my book a lot of fluke all rounders. Do I need to name those? Yes. We're all obsessed with Gary Sobers. I've never seen him play because he played in an era when I wasn't around. If I wasn't around, it wasn't documented, and if it wasn't documented, it doesn't count in my book. So for me, people like Gary Sobers, Sanay Jayasuriya were decent batters who could bowl. Yes, they got 300 wickets, but then it was the pre-DRS, pre-technological, pre-Hawkeye era. That time, the umpires would give anything out because they had nothing to confront them, nothing to challenge them. So, yes, well, that's the obsession we have. But let's move on to the match. Of course, 6 for 287 in the 21st century in a 50-over match is not enough, but you don't always have to score 400 runs to prove yourself. And South Africa chased it down. So one would say that India did not bowl that well to defend 287. They allowed an opening partnership of 130 runs. And then, of course, certain players were having a good time with the bat, managed to chase it down. So yes, game 2 unable to defend 287. Game 3 was a deja vu moment. Let's see how it went about. Game 3 was the opposite. South Africa batted first, and of course, once again, they were 70 for 3, like in the first match, but they somehow clawed and scratched their way to 287. But their numbers 6 to 10 did not contribute much, but it didn't matter because enough people made runs and they scratched and clawed their way to 287. India started well. There were a couple of good partnerships, and then came the big one, the shot selection debate. A certain player played a shot which could have gone for a boundary or a six, but that day it landed in the hand of the fielder, and everyone questioned the shot selection of that player. Why did that happen? Because they're jealous, they're envious. Because according to them, if had we played that shot, we would have been out of the sport, or the selectors would have shown us the door and told us to leave the building. But this guy, despite playing two relatively poor shots, what defines a good shot and a poor shot is once again subject to interpretation. Had the ball gone to the left or right of the fielder, it would have been a brilliant shot. So it's subject to interpretation and matter of luck. But that day it did not work, and there was once again the middle order question. As I said, there is no middle order muddle, but then the superficial experts question the current lot of legends. And these superficial experts know that they will never be fired from their position, so they can say what they want to say. They have the right to say it because they're using the right to freedom of speech and expression to the fullest extent. So there's clear signs of jealousy and envy, and knowing that they will never be fired, they can say what they want to say. It's ironical because sports athletes their performances are reviewed, whether it's a 6 months performance review or a yearly performance review or whatever is the methodology. Then the governing body sits down and says these players continue to perform and this group is not performing as per the expected level. So they should be out of the team, out of the sport, and they should go back to the drawing board and relearn things. But pseudo experts and the people who write columns in the newspapers and magazines and print, electronic and digital superficial media, they know whether they write negative or whether they write positive, they will never be fired. Of course, contract may not be renewed. They may move on to a different employee, but they know that they will always be called by some or the other broadcaster, whether it's a digital broadcaster or a proper broadcaster.
It's 10 hours.
And the interesting thing is that with this 3-0 loss, alarm bells have been rung as if chances for the next two World Cups are zero. Well, I disagree with that. It's a long way to go. Yes, the 20 over World Cup last year did not go according to plan and we were knocked out from the group stage. I'll talk more on that as this talk show progresses, as this episode progresses. But saying that there's a problem, we don't know who our batters are, we don't know who our openers are, we don't know who our all-rounders are. I think that's just speculation. That's just adding more panic to where panic should not be. Wins and losses happen. Yes, 3-0 doesn't reflect what the team did, but then it doesn't matter. You lose, there are problems all round. Let me just read a few lines from the print media as to how they looked at this, because it is very interesting as to how they looked at this situation. At one stage, things De Kock's sublime 124 laid the platform for South Africa's eventual total of 287, which proved to be 4 runs more than what India could manage. That the win meant a 3-0 clean sweep of Rahul and co. So we are being specific about individuals that the captain appointed for this tournament wasn't astute enough to lead his team. He didn't have the aggression of the previous captains. He didn't have the pedigree of what a captain should be. Who defines what a captain should be? We give too much importance to captains and individuals in certain sports. Captains are just an individual appointed. And then you don't need any experience to be a captain. It just happens. And then, of course, just like the first two ODIs, Indian spinners were ineffective. Neither picked a wicket nor could keep a check on the run flow. So, of course, issues with the opening, issues with the middle order, issues with who is your designated all-rounder, whether it's a spinning all-rounder or a fast bowling all-rounder, and then issues with the spin department. Because we chose Ashwin, of course, the whole Ashwin debate over, if we are being specific about specific individuals, then the whole debate over whether certain players should play red ball or white ball, or whether they are effective, or whether they are the right individuals to play, do they have the skills to stop the runs, and that's what we look at. Ineffective. Overall, according to these superficial morons who love playing judge and jury, India's performance was ineffective, and that's in their nutshell. In my nutshell, it's not an existential crisis. It's not the end of the world to lose a series 3-0 and say that it's the end of the world. The chances for the upcoming World Cup, there are no chances for the upcoming World Cup. So why even discuss that? Of course, I disagree with such a thought process. I won't say it's negative or positive, but it's been going on for too long. But they have the right. They think they are the judge and jury, and unlike sports athletes, their performances of what they write won't be reviewed, because that's exactly the need of the hour, to be scathing of Indian athletes, whether it's football, hockey, badminton, tennis, because it's a universal truth that the Indian media would rather be cheerleaders for foreign athletes, which includes, of course, the fluke of Nadal and Djokovic and others, than be cheerleaders for their own athletes, because it's difficult, because it may be seen as bias if they are cheerleading the likes of Rohan Bopanna or Lakshya Sen. Yes, they do appreciate them, but they will hesitate to call someone like a Rohan Bapana who's been performing and playing for the same duration as a Nadal or a Djokovic or a Federer for over 20 years, but we will hesitate to call them because he doesn't have too many championships to show for, or they don't reach the finals of all these Australian Open, Wimbledon, French Open, Roland Garros, or whatever. So we are hesitant. But back to this particular sport, it's not anything to be concerned about. It's not the end of the world. Anything is possible in the next 9 months. We shall discuss that, the 20 over World Championship. We will discuss that as this episode progresses. But I don't think it's an existential crisis. It's not the end of the world. It's not about cheerleading for them, but it's about being logical. Teams have lost in worse manners, but they have moved on. If I could give you an example, before Australia went on to win the 20 over World Championship, they lost 10 to 11 20 over private matches in a row. Everyone said Australia has no chance. But for the Australian team, the coach, the captain, they were making sure that those players who were there and those who were not there, that's a different story. But the players who were there, they knew what they were supposed to do. They lost 11 20 over private matches before the 20 over World Cup. And yet, when it mattered, they went on to win the 20 over World Championship. And then everyone appreciated sending a certain Mitchell Marsh at number 3. Wow, what a strategy, it worked. And keeping Steve Smith at number 5 or number 6, it worked. And they had already tried him in those positions in the last 12 months. So I don't think this loss is something that will have a negative impact. Of course, certain players will have to relook as to how they perform, but I do not agree with this white ball, red ball division, or this question about keeper, batter, keeper, or batting all-rounder or bowling all-rounder. If you're jealous, then say that you are jealous, but don't use such terms, because such terms really don't make a difference. So let's not get into that debate. Let's move on. As everyone knows, the 20 over World Championship is slated to be conducted later this year. And as I said on my review of the World Championship, that the round robin format should have been a preferred format. It would have given every team more chances instead of being in a group and knowing that if you lose 1 or 2, you're knocked out. But the ICC doesn't learn from its mistakes. Once again, it has preferred the group format, which is, I'm flummoxed by that decision. I have no idea why do they prefer the group format of 6 teams each, which means 4 teams out of the 12 teams will make it to the semi-finals or the knockout stages, and the other teams, if they don't perform or they don't win their opening matches, they will be knocked out. As it happened last year for certain teams, you didn't win your opening 2 matches and you were knocked out. I think the group format is not the correct format for a championship, unless there are a lot of teams and then you have the quarterfinal stage, the semi-final stage, and the finals, then it's fine. But if you have only 6 teams or rather 12 teams, then why can't you go ahead with round robin format? It will take us, of course, it's a 3-week tournament. I think it won't make a difference. Each team plays each other once, and then the team with the most points, of course, you get 11 chances. Even if there are some hiccups in between, you still make it up. Here, there is no second chance. You lose, then you're in trouble for the next few matches. And then last year's performances will be once again reiterated, because that's what the superficial PED morons love to do. So this is how it's stacked. Group 1 has Australia, New Zealand, England, Afghanistan. So you have the two finalists from this team, which means either both of them qualify or one will certainly be knocked out from the group. And let's say in Group 1, Australia doesn't win all its matches. Let's say it loses to England or Afghanistan, or it doesn't win 4 out of the 5 matches. It has a 3-2 win-loss ratio, which means net run rate will come into play in this particular context. You could see both Australia and New Zealand disqualified. It's not going to be surprising. Of course, there are 2 teams who have to come through qualifiers. Did you notice that teams like West Indies and Sri Lanka still have to go through the qualifying phase, which is baffling, but they are down the pecking order as far as the rankings are concerned. The way the group has been, it is quite possible that you could see both Australia and New Zealand or England. If they lose, they could be knocked out. So if you have to win your first match, and if you don't, then you're in trouble for the rest of the tournament because there are not too many chances. In Group 2, once again, under broadcaster pressure, they have put India and our neighbors, 2 neighbors, in the same group, which means once this tournament starts, and the first game is India-Pakistan. Ironically, once again, last year's, the broadcasters will talk about last year's footages. The print media will bring out last year why they lost and the poor planning leading up to the tournament and how our neighboring country to the west is more prepared. They have a good opening combination. They have a decent middle order, an experienced middle order, a couple of 40 years old, and they have one guy who can hit 25 of 4 balls to take the team to a good score. And then South Africa, who beat them 3-0 in the 50-over tournament prior to this, and then a lot of matches to happen. So let's see what happens. Do these bilateral tournaments make a difference? They do in terms of the team management knowing who is playing, who is not playing. But I still think it was a poor decision to go with the decision for the group format because it then puts all these 12 teams under pressure. They know that they lose one or there is a stumbling block, then they're out of the tournament. Nobody knows what is going to happen, but they're well aware that the group format doesn't help, especially if you only have 12 teams and the next stage is the semi-final stage, and if you lose, you are out. So if teams like Australia, New Zealand, England, India, Pakistan, South Africa, Bangladesh, if you don't know who the qualifiers are, who the 2 teams who will qualify to the main stage are right now, because that's one tournament which will be played before as it happened last year. If either of these teams lose their first match, of course, one will win, one will lose, that's a given. But whichever team loses knows that they are under pressure, they have to win their next 4 matches or their chances of going to the next stage are 0. Whether it's the fact that the International Cricket Board wants the team to be under pressure and perform, or what's the reason for a group format, I don't know, but I think it's an outdated format and round robin where each team would have played the other. There were no group pressures. You had 11 chances, would have been a preferred format. I thought the scheduling committee or whoever makes the schedule would have learned this, because this then isolates a few teams. Everyone knows that Bangladesh, Afghanistan, India chances are reduced because of their performance last year. And then the broadcaster pressure maybe forced ICC to go with this outdated format. We don't know, but I think this was a poor decision. They have to relook at this, but now that the schedule is out, you can't go back. But who are the number 1 contenders as they were last year? Of course, India was part of the number 1 contenders to win, but this year, don't be surprised if the pseudo experts, the print, electronic, and digital media don't put India in the number one contenders category. So, who are the number one contenders? For me, India is there, but let's be logical and let's look at the logical number one contenders. Once again, Australia, defending champion New Zealand, finalists. South Africa
It's 10:15.
lost by net run rate. Pakistan semi-finalists. England semi-finalists. So all of them were there in the last stages. All these five teams were there in the dying stages of the tournament. So by default and design, they are the number one contenders. India won't be anywhere in the list of contenders due to their once in a blue moon bad performance, aided by poor umpiring and shoddy scheduling. So this tournament is expected to be played between 16 October and 13 November. Remember, this tournament is happening in Australia. So expect rains to play a huge role. Rains will define a majority of the matches, which means you may not see full 20 over matches. You may see quick 10 over matches. It's a possibility. Rains will define this tournament. You might be surprised at how can it rain in Australia in October. Australia, it rains. Rains can happen anytime. The match is happening. It can rain in the middle of the match, in between two innings break, but rain will play a huge role in this particular tournament. It did not play a huge role in Dubai because it was in the deserts. So rain was never going to be a factor over there. But rain will be a huge, huge factor as far as this tournament is concerned. Don't be surprised by the same. So, what does the schedule look like? Well, let's go with the fact that we have to accept that the group format is going to happen. You can't go back. So these are the matches scheduled, but look on the extreme right column. Last year, the matches were at 7:30 Indian Standard Time, which means people could return from their work, whether they were working from their own homes or outside, or whether they were traveling. They could return by 7 o'clock, watch the match, have dinner, and enjoy themselves. But this year, because it's in Australia, and yeah, it's shocking. Most people don't know that Australia is 5 to 5.5 hours ahead of India. The matches are going to take place at a time when people, it's lunchtime usually, but it's also a siesta time, or they're working, or they may not be at home. But you have to accept the fact that that's the way the schedule is, because you have to look at where the match is happening, not if it suits the India. I think 1:30 p.m. does suit everyone, because last year the matches were going as late as 11 o'clock Indian time. So I think this is a perfect scenario. 1:30 p.m. is perfect. Why do you need an afternoon siesta anyway? Of course, sometimes you do need it, but most of the time you don't. So 1:30 p.m., 12:30 p.m., 4:30 p.m., and then 1:30 p.m. each. But as I said, expect rains to play a huge role in this particular tournament. You cannot get without rains. Rains will define this tournament. Mark my words. Still 7-8 months to go, but if going by how the Australian T20 competition has gone by, well, rain and other mitigating factors have influenced the game, where the Australia-England Ashes has been influenced by rain, hours and hours of rain. Expect a couple of matches to be rained out and teams getting those one. I hope the International Cricket Council is prepared for rains. If the match is rained out, the points table will have a huge impact. It will be affected from both sides, and that is why in this scenario the round robin format would have been preferable, because it would have been equal for everyone. Here you may have an unequal distribution of points, and chances. Teams could go without winning a single match into the next stage, or winning one match or winning two matches and playing shortened matches and to their advantage. Some matches may not be rained out, some matches may be semi rained out, but rain will play a huge role. How can you not be affected by rain in countries like Australia, England, South Africa, irrespective of when the matches are scheduled? So this ends episode number 474 on the 26th of January 2022, and stay tuned for the next episode.
For more awesome content, tune into the next episode of the Weekly Show.
I will be back on Friday, the 28th of January 2022, with episode number 475, a milestone moment, episode number 475. And while you wait for the next episode, what should you do? Put these books in your must-read books column. Once again, put these books in your must-read books column.